spooks and specters. Welcome to week 3 of Friday Frights. This week I'm going to go a little different and I'm going to tell you a local urban legend. It takes place in Franklin, which was once part of Norwich, and it is the story of Micah Rood and his cursed apples. So, Micah arrived in town in the late 1690s. There's controversy about where he actually came from, but he bought a parcel of land, and he worked his homestead. It was an okay homestead. He wasn't getting the most bountiful crops, but he made enough to get by, and he was able to barter his goods with whatever else that he needed. The one thing that Micah was really good at was his apple trees were among the best in the region. So good that people even up in Boston had heard about them. They were known as Mike's apples. So Micah was a pretty affable guy. He was a good neighbor. He liked to help people out if they needed. He wouldn't turn anyone away. Some people allege that was to his own detriment, and that's why his farm wasn't as prosperous as it could have been. Either way, he was a pretty good neighbor until one day he wasn't. Out of the blue, all of a sudden he turned mean. He was a recluse. He would argue with anyone that he came across. He would tell people to get off of his land. It was just, he did a complete 180. So one night in December, there was a peddler in town named Horgan, and Horgan was pretty well known. For those who are aware, peddlers were people who basically traveling salespeople. This is before you really had much choice in terms of shopping. A lot of times there was a mercantile, and you were kind of at the mercy of when ships would come in with goods. So a traveling peddler would have options for you to purchase that you wouldn't necessarily get at the local general store. And the housewives and even the gentlemen in the house were pretty excited when they would come by. And Horgan was one of the better known peddlers because he had some really good selection. And he would sell most of his stuff during the day. So at night, his coin purse was pretty full. So for some reason, Horgan decided to go to the Rood homestead and see if he could sell his stuff. Some say he was coerced into going into the Rood homestead. Either way, late that night, Horgan was killed. His head was spliced open by an axe, and he was found at the base of an apple tree. With his goods all gone and his money missing. Everybody was like, oh, well, obviously Micah Rood did it. I mean, he's dead on his homestead. Micah has gone from being a well-respected neighbor to being feared and despised. But Rood said, no, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. The traveling authorities were able to stop by and investigate. Rood even said, hey, come on in. And they weren't able to find anything. So, not having any sort of answer to how Horgan died, they just took his body and buried him in the local potter's field, which is where the poor and unknown were buried. So spring happened, and all of a sudden, Rood's farm became prosperous like it had never been before. So of course, his neighbors were really suspicious because somehow Rood went from barely scraping by to having a lot of money. They started to believe that Micah had taken the coins and the possessions of the peddler and used it to invest in his farm, and his farm took off. That isn't the strangest thing about what happened. So when the flowers started blooming and the apple trees blossomed, apple trees have white to slightly pink blossoms, but the apple tree where the peddler was found underneath had red blossoms all of a sudden. People thought, oh, well, that's a little strange. But it wasn't strange as much as it was in August when the tree started bearing fruit. And so they ate the apples from that tree, and inside of the apples with the red flowers had a drop of red in it. So it almost looked like a drop of blood. Every apple on that tree had what looked like a blood stain inside. But every other tree was fine. It was just the one that was at the tree that he was found underneath. And also during that time, Rood started to fall into a fast decline. He became even more melancholy, even more combative. He was constantly fearful. His farm started to fail because he was afraid to go out to work the fields, because he said that the land was now cursed and that the peddler was haunting his homestead. People could hear him screaming late at night and pacing to and fro in his homes by the light of a single candle. And yet the tree, year after year, would bear the same fruit with the bloodstain. People have stolen the apples and have gone to plant their own version, and those trees never had the red stain. It was just that particular tree where the peddler was found. So by 1717, Rood was even more frail. His farm was completely overgrown and he had really nothing to eat. So the town people got together and decided that if he would maintain the local meeting house in its grounds, each family would donate an ear of corn for him to live off of. And that's how he continued on for the next 10 years until he died in a chair overlooking the apple tree. And some say that they could hear the screams long after he died until the tree itself, which continued to blossom its red leaves and its blood-stained apples, until it was finally torn down and destroyed by the 1938 hurricane. And who knows? If you were to go around Franklin and go to where the old homestead is, you might be able to find a red-stained apple to this day. And still, nobody knows officially what happened to the peddler. All they know is that that land was cursed and Rood was never the same again.